everybody! It's your friendly digital technology librarian, Christy here. We have reached another Friday, so of course I have another Film Rec Friday ready for everybody out there. This week we are going to cover a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. If you have watched these Film Rec videos for any length of time, you already know I'm a massive, massive fan for foodie films. But this week we're focusing on a particular subset of foodie films, and those are the ones that have to do with baking and baked goods. Now, I don't know what it is about these particular films. Maybe it's some primordial part of the brain that relates hearth with home, and of course, baked goods were originally like a hearth kind of product. I don't know. But all of that sort of rolls together into movies that have a tendency to make us feel comforted. Or they make us feel a sense of home and family. There's just something about these movies that is different from other foodie films. And, I just decided that I wanted to kind of explore that concept. And I was not super surprised to discover that the bakery movies that I did cover all did have some sense of familiarity, some sense of family, some sort of deeper rooted emotional connection to them. And I really find that interesting. So I'm hoping that you will feel the same way. As always, these videos are all available totally for free with the use of your Milan-Berlin library card. They are available on our 3 video services, which are CleveNet's Overdrive, Hoopla Digital, and Canopy. So if you are at all interested in these, make sure you check them out. If none of these particular titles really does speak to you, make sure you still check out the video services. You 100% will find something that interests you. There are literally thousands and thousands of movies on there. So without any further ado, I want to go ahead and jump right into these recs. Okay, my first recommendation is from CleveNet's Overdrive, and it is actually for a series of instructional films called The Everyday Gourmet, Baking Pastries and Desserts. Now, this is part of the Great Courses series, so right off the bat, it's going to be like pretty high quality. The Great Courses are amazing, by the way, if you're not familiar with them. So many different topics, and all of the instructional videos that go with it are so well done. Great production quality, really great experts who have tons of information to impart. And the Everyday Gourmet is no different from that. The instructions are given by Chef Stephen Durfee. He's like this award-winning pastry chef, and he is with the Culinary Institute of America. So right off the bat, you have somebody who really knows what he's talking about. Now, coming from someone who, while an avid baker, isn't a particularly trained baker, I didn't even take home ec in school. I think that if I can follow along with the instructions given in these videos, anyone can, because I generally bake pretty simple, standard things like cookies, cakes, cupcakes, like basic baking goods. But Chef Durfee explains everything, even for like the super fancy and foofy desserts that he covers, in a way that makes it really very clear. So, no matter what kind of baking background you have, if you're a total beginner, if you're someone who really knows their stuff but wants to sort of maybe get, a refresher course on some of the techniques that you've had and learned over the years, this is really a great jumping off point. Again, skill level wherever you are, this is very fun to watch and easy to follow. Durfee is really quite charismatic. He isn't one of those instructors who just sort of drones on. I actually like him even more than some of the personalities on, say, like Food Network or the Cooking Channel. So you've got a really solid host who knows his stuff. You've got really cool desserts that he covers and is good at actually teaching. He has like custards, which I have always had a difficulty making. Mine turn out lumpy, and I don't know why, but I'm going to try some of the methods that are imparted in this. Hopefully they will be not lumpy in the future. Things like cream puffs, different mousses, different cakes, things that it would make baking desserts and creating desserts easier to know. So like serious fundamentals, he's got them covered. other than just being a wealth of knowledge, you've got really good production quality. Everything looks bright, shiny, clear. It's not, you've all seen like those instructional videos that look like they're straight out of the 60s. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but for a really visual audience, sometimes like the super dated stuff makes it a more of a challenge to follow through with. And these are not that. These are really, really very contemporary. Um, Clear instructions, always very, very easy to follow. Equipment that's not out of the realm of possibility for everybody. You know, maybe you don't have a stand mixer, but they make it very clear you can either use like one of the corded mixers or just your hand in a whisk, though I wouldn't recommend it for some things because that's a lot of bicep power that you would need. But anyway, it's definitely one of those film series that I think is both entertaining, educational, and practical. And for me, that's one of the big things with cooking instructions. The instructional videos where it's like you have to have this fancy pants whatever, or they're they're a turn off right away. Whereas this, everything is, you know, within reach. It's reasonable, and even though it's coming from like this big fancy chef, it never feels like, you know, they're out of the finished products are going to be out of reach. I never felt that way. So if you're looking for either a refresher course or a starting off point, check out the Great Courses series, the Everyday Gourmet, Baking Pastries and Desserts. So informative, so hunger inducing. Yeah, don't watch these when you're hungry for anything, because you'll want to die before the end of the video comes, because everything looks so good. If you're looking for something that can inspire you to try new desserts, because you will find things that maybe you haven't tried before, check this out. It's a really, really worthwhile check out and borrow. I really loved it, and I will probably go back and rewatch some of the episodes just to further understand some of the instructions. So yeah, Great Courses, the Everyday Gourmet, Baking Pastries and Desserts. Okay, moving right along to our Hoopla digital recommendations. The first of those is for a film called Love is a Piece of Cake. Now, if you couldn't guess from the title that this is very much a Hallmark Hall of Fame style romantic comedy, I guess you haven't been watching these recommendation videos long enough. But there's just something really, really charming about this one in particular. For me, happily ever after inevitable films can be kind of hit or miss. Sometimes it'll be the cast of actors, they'll be a little too hokey, or the storyline will be like just too saccharine and too cliched. But even though a lot of this kind of storyline is predictable, I think that the actors do an excellent job with the script, and I actually think there are parts of the script that definitely stand up to some of the best romantic comedies. Again, this is definitely a Hallmark style movie, but it's not that it's Hallmark style because it's low quality or anything. Hallmark has been pumping out some really, really solidly done romances, and this is one of them. So in Love is a Piece of Cake, you've got Jessie, who happens to be this third generation baker, I want to say. She runs a little cake shop. She's very well known amongst her clientele. She does weddings, parties, things like that, and she's very, very happy, and she has a really fulfilling life. But the conflict comes in when this development group wants to invade and take over her location. And so she's got to figure out some way to compete with them, make sure that she can hold on to her bakery. And amidst this professional battle, she meets this really nice, handsome guy who she starts to fall in love with. And I don't want to give too much away, but a lot of the storylines start to get a little bit tangled and interwoven, and it becomes a bit of a mess, not in like the storyline way, but in the written way. I mean, it becomes a mess in that all of these things converge, and it creates a pretty intense conflict for our heroine. And, again, happily ever after inevitable. But it's really interesting how she gets there. And even if it is sort of vaguely predictable in the way that happily ever after movies tend to be, the journey to that ending is really, really enjoyable. I liked so much of it. I love that she's a really focused, driven woman who loves what she does. And again, that whole concept of comfort from baking and hearth and home. This one is definitely one of those movies that sinks its teeth into that concept. Because the things that happen to her seem familiar, even if you've clearly never dealt with that sort of conflict in your life, you can feel like sympathy for her. And, when you see her cooking, when you see her giving clients like the finished product, it's just, it gives you warm fuzzies. I don't know. I really, really love it. So if you're looking for simple but totally enjoyable, if you're looking for something that is visually very appealing, the food, also the actors, but the food in particular, if you're looking for an atypical, typical romantic comedy, check out Love is a Piece of Cake. It's very well done and very entertaining, and I think you'll enjoy it. Moving right along to our second Hoopla digital pick. This one is for a lovely little British film called Love, Sarah. Now, I don't know what it is about British movies, but I absolutely love them. Something about the sensibility of the characters, even though we have a very common language, of course, there's just something just different enough between an American approach to emotions versus a British approach to emotions that makes these movies and their characters feel so much different. And so I really, really love watching these kinds of movies, especially since when Love Sarah, we're dealing with that whole concept of baking and comfort and love and a ton of other complex emotions, which I'll get to in just a moment. But yeah, I really, really enjoy this movie. In Love Sarah, it sort of follows this 19-year-old woman named Clarissa. She just lost her mother, and to sort of honor her, she hopes to fulfill her late mom's dream of opening a bakery. Now, her late mother's dream was almost fulfilled. She had plans with her best friend, Isabella, to open this new bakery, but circumstances happened and that just didn't come to fruition. Additionally, the late mother had an estranged relationship with her own mother, Mimi, and they, even with the best of intentions, had never been able to make things right between each other. So Clarissa has these goals. She ends up working with Isabella to open up her mother's dream bakery, as well as working with her grandmother Mimi to make all of these dreams happen. And there's just something really fascinating about the interaction between these three women that I just totally sunk into the film immediately. I thought the acting was exceptional. The people they cast are so solid. They're very familiar faces. If you've watched much British film at all, you will definitely recognize Mimi, as well as several other character actors who are in the cast. So as I was mentioning, you have these really complex relationships between these three women who had this central figure who is no longer there, and the three have to learn to navigate one another's quirks and eccentricities in order to build a business. In addition to this sort of challenging situation that the three of them find themselves in, they have to figure out how to build this business. You meet a really fantastic pastry chef who creates extremely good looking food. Do not watch this if you're hungry. It would be a huge mistake. Frankly, I hate to admit it, but I definitely ate more cake watching this movie than I have in ages. I would like pause it and be like, I need a slice of cake. Um, it's like the food in this looks just that good. It's ridiculous how well styled everything is. Um, Throughout the whole film too, like it's a little bit ridiculous how good all the desserts look. You meet other characters that sort of come into these women's lives at just the right moment, and all of this sort of weaves around again that concept of baking as comfort and baking as this common bond between everyone. Um, I really, really loved how we saw so much growth between those three central characters, both as individuals and then as this crew that's working together. And, it's just really touching without being overly sentimental. There's a pragmatism to it that I really, really appreciated, and absolutely think that um, if you like movies that will move you, if you like movies that deal with difficult concepts like grief in a really practical, believable, relatable way, if you're looking for a movie that will absolutely make you hungry and long for ridiculously beautiful desserts, check out Love, Sarah. I adored this movie, and I think that you will too. Moving on to my Canopy recommendations. The first of those is my pick of the week, actually. It's for this absolutely gorgeous movie called Sweet Bean. Sweet Bean is a Japanese film, so of course, Japanese audio, English subtitles, and while I say this every time, I seriously mean it this time. Watch it even if you hate subtitles. This movie is just so, so incredibly beautiful and unbelievably moving. Um, the sweet bean that the title refers to is this red bean paste, oftentimes found in Japanese desserts or other foods. You can find it sandwiched inside mochi, in different soups sometimes. You can find it all over the place. And in the case of this film, it's the red bean paste that is part of making a dorayaki, which is sort of two kind of pancakey substances with this on-filling sandwich inside. It's super traditional, and it's absolutely delicious. And everyone's dorayaki is going to be different because everybody's on paste is going to be different. It's one of those things that really traditional bakeries will sort of like clutch in their little fists. No one else can have this recipe because just slight variations can completely change the taste. No one family's on recipe is going to be the same as another's. Now, in this film, we're talking about a man named Sentaro who runs a tiny little stand where he sells pretty rote dorayaki. He uses a commercial bean paste. Actually, it's not even his own. And he does fine. He has regulars, locals that come out to pick up these sweets. He's got tons of students who come in to pick up sweets. But it's one of those jobs, it's just a job for him. It's not a calling. It's got no relation to family. It's just the way things go for him. Until he advertises for some help. And this older woman, she's like, I think she's supposed to be in her late 70s, comes by and says she's always wanted to work in a little dessert shop. He, of course, is quite hesitant about the situation because he was asking for a worker who, could really help pick up a lot of the difficult things that are going on in a bakery, and hiring someone who's pushing 80 was definitely not part of the plan. So, he's kind of surprised by the turn of events. He does initially turn her down because, again, she's not what he was looking for, but she leaves him with a sample of her homemade on, and that changes everything. Because he's so intrigued by this on, which is he finds it to be one of the best things he's ever had, and he doesn't even understand how it could possibly be so good. He ends up hiring her, and his stand begins to do incredibly well because, again, he was just using some random commercially made bean paste that, anyone can get from anywhere. It just comes from like essentially a can. Now, as this older woman is working with him, they develop like a friendship, a camaraderie, a familial feeling, and she starts to impart information about how to make her on. And I think anytime we cover topics where someone from another generation especially is sort of imparting knowledge, passing along these gifts of time, I think I always feel affected by it. I always feel very moved. And this film just has this vibe to it that is so warm and so, I don't know, comforting a lot in a lot of ways. So even if you're not familiar with On, if you know nothing about Japanese culture, if you don't care about Japanese culture, that emotion that you get from seeing someone pass knowledge along is still so very vivid. You feel that because it doesn't matter where you come from, that passing along of gifts, that passing along of knowledge, of the imparting of culture is, I think, a universal sort of knee-jerk reaction. You always feel connected to seeing moments like that. And the scenes where she's teaching Sentaro to make the bean paste are some of the most beautiful scenes in this movie. Just extraordinary. So as I was mentioning, his business is like going nuts. He's doing so well. But something happens. His Tokue, who is the older woman, has a secret. The secret comes out and she disappears essentially. And I don't want to give away any more because it is a really pivotal part of the storyline, her secret in particular. Not the fact that she has a secret, like that's pretty apparent from the trailers. Anyway, if you are looking for something absolutely beautiful, because it is, if you're looking for something that I think would make you long for your grandparents, if you're looking for something that imparts this feeling of nostalgia, even for a culture that you might not be familiar with, please check out Sweet Bean. It is such an extremely wonderful movie. I cannot recommend it enough. I'm still like debating on if I want to watch it again already. But yeah, Sweet Bean, available on Canopy. I believe it's also available on Hoopla, so if you've run through your Canopy checkouts for the month, make sure you check it out on Hoopla. It is totally worth it. And again, absolutely worth the trouble of English subtitles. Okay, my final film recommendation for the week is another Canopy title, and this one is called The Cakemaker. The Cakemaker was one of those movies that had been on my to-be watch list for ages, but I just never got around to it. Partly because I knew it wasn't going to be a super happy film, but also partly just because like the themes are such that I was kind of waffling about it. In The Cakemaker, you've got a young German baker named Thomas who ends up having an affair with a married man from Israel named Oren. Now, Thomas and Oren have crazy good chemistry. It's a lovely little romance for the brief time that we see them together. But then Oren disappears, and come to find out, Oren has died in a car accident in Israel. Thomas wants to find out more because he has no information about it. He has no legal connection to this man, so he has no way of finding out more unless he goes to Israel to discover what's been going on. So he does. And he manipulates the situation so that he ends up working for Oren's recently widowed wife. Her name is Anat. And, all that I got from the trailers and the description, and I was kind of like, oh no. movies about like infidelity and stuff like that, where it's like such a central part of the storyline, I'm always kind of like side-eyeing just because I'm like, how can this end well? um, but the Cake Maker, there's something about the writing and definitely something about the acting that makes the topic much more approachable. I would not have believed that again from the trailers. I thought it was just going to be depressing and sad and just awful, to be honest. And then while I was watching it, I was so caught up in the stories. Like, I was so caught up in Thomas and his desire to know more, to find out, to have some sort of closure or not. And then for Anat, who's desperately trying to keep her life together after losing her husband. And the way these two collide and orbit around one another was absolutely fascinating to me. I mean, really, truly fascinating. Um, Anat runs this little cafe, and that's how Thomas maneuvers himself into her life. Um, he ends up getting caught up in much more of her situation than he ever intended, and that culminates in this huge situation. Um, and like I said, when you're dealing with these kinds of heavier themes, you never think that it's going to end up well. But I do think that The Cake Maker is thoroughly watchable and enjoyable. I enjoy is a hard word with this one, but I was 100% what's the right word? Invested in this storyline. I think that's the best way to put it. You're caught up. You want to find out what happens. You want to know how they can possibly make any of this work out in a way that's not total tragedy. And I don't think it's a spoiler to say that it's a worthwhile film. It absolutely is. The acting, the story itself, really, really well done. Like the script, like the ins and outs, how things get to where they get to. Um, the production values, good grief, do those pastries look amazing. Um, I really, really liked this movie, and I really didn't expect to. My barometer was way low. I was just not expecting to enjoy it as much as I did. So if you are looking for something a little heavier, but with excellent writing and acting, with complex relationships, and with an infinitely relatable set of complex emotions, check out The Cake Maker. It is a phenomenally well done film, and I think you will enjoy it. So that was my final recommendation of this week. Thank you so much, as always, for joining me. If you have any recommendations for stories about bakeries or baked goods that you want to share with us, please, please, please leave a comment below and let us know what that title is. I'm always looking for more recommendations, especially for foodie movies, because I love them. If you are interested in seeing us cover any particular themes in the future, comment with those too. I am definitely always looking for recommendations for those. I hope that one of these films at least caught your attention. There are so many more incredible baked goods and bakery movies out there. And again, I really do think they have that commonality between them of family, connection, home, hearth, safety, comfort. Watch one, see if it speaks to you. I just think there's something fascinating about this format in particular that is so easy to connect to. So I guess that is it for this week. I'm going to go ahead and close things out. Again, thank you so, so much for joining me, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.